All right. Hello, everyone. So, as most probably I've explained this to you in our lecture, I will be recording the chapters basically in my own free time. Please use these recordings to help you study. It's not mandatory to listen to them. They're just here to really help you. So let's start off with chapter one. So chapter one of the Raven McGraw book, basically the science of biology. What I have to say, it's a very interesting title, The Science of Biology, very poetic for me. And in this part, we are gonna really speak at really the science of biology. What is biology? What is the field of biology per se? How can you define it? But also, we're gonna definitely talk and how to study this. How can someone want to study biology? And then, of course, we'll give you a big example of how we study biology or people have done so in the past. And specifically, we will use Darwin, Charles Darwin, as an example of how he did basically study biology. So let's define biology per se. Biology, if you want to really define it on its simplest term, it's the science concerned with the study of life on Earth. Please take into consideration on Earth, okay? Because if, let's imagine, you want to study the life on Mars, that's astrobiology. That's a different thing. Biology, when we say biology, it means life on Earth, basically here. And biologists ask question is, what is life? How does a single cell develop into an organism? How does the human mind work, etc.? These are questions that have to do with life itself right now here at Earth. So it's really a quest. It's an ongoing inquiry of the nature of life. And I have to see biology has really, the study of it has really increased. In the past 25 years, we've learned so much of biology than the rest of the time. Just in these 25 years, because our technology has surfaced to an immense amount. Sometimes I sit down and I read papers and I read the new methods that are coming out, the new technologies coming out. It's just extremely overwhelming, but also exciting at the same time. And I want to give you an example. This is literally by the early of the 21st century for us to basically do this sequencing of a whole genome took us 20 years, damn it. There was this whole project of the sequencing of the human genome, and that was literally one of the biggest projects. It was literally like science fiction for someone to be like, yeah, I'm going to basically sequence the whole entire genome. Nowadays it's nothing. Nowadays you can literally go to big institutes or even hospitals or certain clinics that will do it for you for quite cheap. Well, not cheap, like for cents, but relatively cheap compared to before. Before it was costing millions, hundreds of millions. Now it can cost you a couple of thousands. I would say like let's say tens of thousands. Let's put it that more way. If you want to really sequence the whole genome, which it's quite possible. So imagine there is actually the Crick's Institute in UK have sequenced something like 3 million. No, sorry, 300,000. Sorry, 300,000 genomes in just like 3.5 years. Of course, with this amount of data, imagine you have 300,000 plus genomes of humans. You can extract so much data. You can look at certain genes. You can look at certain polymorphisms. You can look at so many different things and question a lot. And now that's why biology has been growing a lot. Our questions are becoming infinite almost to the point that every question nowadays, when you get the answer, more questions are coming up, and we're able to resolve them because of this. Another big example of this is also microscopes. Microscopes back in the day were nothing compared to the microscopes that we have now. Now we have something called spatial imaging that is literally a technique I'm learning right now from my experiments that allows you to image cells in a spatial manner, literally in a 3D almost kind of context. And you're able to label them in a very deep way. In a sense, you can actually, let's imagine you have a tumor, you have literally a cancer, which cancer is made of cancer cells, of fibroblasts, of different types of basically endosomal cells, all these different things. The immune system, there's many different types of immune cells. Now I can literally label them all in a spatial manner and I can understand the interactions that are going. This is something that really helps us out fully understand how does our immune system tackle cancer, for example. So really the field of biology has really surfaced and become a huge thing. So of course, life is recognized by living things. So when we say here the study of life, we need to really go and start thinking what life is. Life for us, for example, is a horse that's riding. But for us, a moving car or a jello that you literally hit and jiggles is not life. Just because it moves, it does not mean it's alive. We need to have a certain characteristic for life, and we have done so. So let's still go into biology per se. Biology, please don't think of it as just one type of science. No, biology, as we said, is the study of life on Earth. Well, life on Earth is constituted by multiple different types of sciences. It's interdisciplinary, meaning that it has more than one field of science coming in together. So when you study science, basically life, you're studying, of course, the biology aspect of it. You're also studying the chemical prospect of it and also the physical aspect of it. I know this seems complicated, but let me simplify this, okay? So let's imagine I am trying to understand how a cell is working, okay? So that is a biological question. I want to understand how this, small little life is basically working. Well, we started to see that, okay, this thing is trying to create ATP. Well, the production of ATP, which is energy, is a whole chemical process of doing so. But then in this chemical process, there's a transfer of energy that is governed by thermodynamic rules. That's physics. So, per se, you are then learning how a cell works, biologically speaking, with a bit of chemistry and a bit of physics in there. So, really, biology, people see it as literally the connection, or let's say the meeting point of multiple types of sciences coming together to give you basically what this life is. So that's what you have to always think about science as biology as being interdisciplinary. It's multiple sciences coming in together. So let's talk about life, to characterize a living organism, because as we know, biology is the study of life on Earth. Okay, let's define life. What is a life? Okay, we're saying that a horse is alive, but a car is not, and basically a walking, and the walking, let's say, a jello is not. So this is basically, we need to define it. We need to put characteristics to this. And there's seven of them, which I'll go one after the other. The first one is cellular organization. That means that all living organisms consist of one or more cells. That's the cell theory. The cell theory literally states that a living organism is unicellular, meaning that one cell, or multicellular, meaning more cells. So that's the most important thing. And as we all know, cells are super small. We cannot see them with the naked eye. We need to actually use microscopes to do this. And cells are bounded by a membrane separating the surrounding from the surrounding environment. What we have inside the cell has to be protected. It has to be put in a confined zone because if you let it grow, it will go all free, or it can actually come in contact with dangerous stuff from outside. So cells are actually have a membrane. So keep that in mind. Second, ordered complexity. We living organisms are complex and highly ordered. For example, our bodies are made up of different types of cells that are ordered and complex, and basically they come together to give a complex structure. Here's a nice example: the sunflower. The sunflower is you have multiple types of cells coming in together to give you this whole nice sunflower per se. So you have multiple different types of cells coming together in a nice kind of ordered manner to give complexity, to give this complex let's say the presence of a complex structure. Example is, let's say, your kidney. Your kidney is made of multiple different types of cells that come all together to give of a kidney, this complex organ. that is ordered of many different cells together. Third, sensitivity. All living organisms have to respond to a stimuli from the surrounding environments. We are literally living beings that are exposed to thousands of stimulus, literally thousands of them. We need to be able to respond to them because if not, we're not able to actually kind of, let's say, presence the things around us. I'll give you an example. Plants, they create energy from light. So they need to start sensing where light is coming from. So sunflowers, you will see them, they point to where the sun is because they are actually kind of finding where the sunlight is coming from. They're literally responding to a stimulus and they will literally turn most of the cells that are basically taking the sunlight towards that direction. Bacteria. Bacteria sometimes need to come to certain areas that are, let's see, there's food or there's certain chemicals or are things that they need. So they need to do basically kind of respond to it, you know? And they do something called chemotaxis, which literally means the movement. Life or life basically human or like living beings need to grow, develop, and reproduce. So any single life form has to be able to grow, develop, and reproduce. And when it comes to reproduction, they need to possess hereditary molecules that are passed on to their offsprings. What are these hereditary molecules? They're genes. You basically, if you want to keep on passing or giving certain characteristics or literally having another form of life, you need to keep these molecules, these hereditary molecules, which is basically genes or DNA. Energy utilization. All living organisms use energy to perform work. We need to obtain energy to do work. So think about it as literally a car needs fuel to work, while we humans need fuel also. Basically, we human beings, we get our actually energy through basically taking molecules, by taking up molecules as in from food. We eat in order to actually create ATP, a process called cellular respiration, which we will very go into very deeply into it later on. Others, for example, like plants, they actually use more chemical energy. This is going to be sunlight, which is can then converts it into literally food for them, which is basically photosynthesis. So as we said, we always need energy. This energy can be actually in a form of chemical energy, which is called ATP. It can be also potential, so stored energy. It could be mechanical energy or kinetic energy. So these types of energies will definitely go into much more details a bit later, but just keep in mind that energy comes in different forms. Homeostasis. Because we are exposed to stimulus quite constantly, we need to be able to maintain some sort of, let's say, constant. So that's what homeostasis means. It literally maintaining a relative constant, relative constant in internal conditions, regardless of the surrounding environment. An example of homeostasis. When we as humans right now, we go outside and it's really cold, we need to make sure that our internal temperature is 37 degrees because if it's not, this can stop a lot of cellular processes in our body and this can be fatal. Decrease it or increase that temperature, it can really be fatal. So we need to be able to actually maintain that internal condition. I'll give you another examples of homeostasis. When we get infected, let's imagine we get infected by influenza, the flu. When influenza comes in, it's going to create a lot of damage, right? We need to stop it. So what we do is we actually induce an immune response, and this immune response is going to come and start to actually destroy all the infected cells. Great, but we need to bring it back to internal or relative constant, and we need to stop this immune response from happening. So we need to return it back to basically its constant condition, which is basically zero. We need to, because if not, it will actually keep, if we keep the immune system active, it can cause autoinflammatory diseases or autoimmune diseases. Last one, we or living organisms have to actually, go on to evolutionary adaptation. We need to adapt to our environment that's key, that's actually changing via evolution. So the environment that we live in keeps changing, and we need to basically evolve towards that. Give you an example, the owl. The owl here is basically camouflaging towards, the tree in a way that is not being able to be seen by other predators or other animals that's able to kill it. There's many different examples. Is I'll give you here now an example of, well, COVID is not really the biggest one, but basically throughout the humanity, we've been exposed to so many diseases, and we've had to evolve either by selecting human beings that are able to survive them and actually have certain mechanisms to survive it, and others that didn't to die. But nowadays we have medicine to actually help with that adaptation. But in generally, living organisms have to learn to adapt to the environment through evolution. Okay, so now we're done with life. Let's talk about the living system. What is this whole living system in there? So living system, it shows some sort of hierarchical organization. So you have a cellular level, an organism level. I'll give you an example to what this hierarchical organization means, and we're going to start with cellular level, okay? So we start off first with atoms. This could be oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, basically nitrogen, you name it. These atoms, they come in together to create molecule. So this is basically organization. They're coming together to be organized to create a new level, which is a molecule. Hence, this is what we mean by hierarchical organization. In the cellular level, we have atoms that come together and create a molecule. So that's one new hierarchy. The molecules come together to create a macromolecule. So an example of this is purely could be amino acids. Amino acids come together to literally create a protein. So then you create another hierarchical organization, which is a macromolecule, in this case, a protein. Then proteins come together then to create an organelle. So again, we create another type of hierarchy based on the organization of proteins together. Organelles then come up together and create one cell. Again, you have another hierarchy by organization. So this is at a cellular level. Let's go into an organism level. So we have tissues. Tissues are literally, a bunch of cells coming together to form a tissue. Then this tissue comes in together and then to create an organ. So this organ is made of multiple different types of tissues. Then multiple organs come in together to create organ systems. And then organ systems, of course, create an organism per se. So this is the organism level. So it comes from tissue, organ system to organism. Now let's go into more of a population kind of level. So here we have a population. What is it, a population? Population means it's a group of organisms of the same species living in the same place and defined area. So that's what is a population is. It's literally, for example, in this case, the same type of duck living all together in one place. Okay? That's what it is. Then we have species. Species, do not confuse it with population. It's basically are organisms of similar in appearance and it can interbreed. So these could be, for example, different types of ducks that are similar in appearance and can interbreed. They're different populations because you have a certain, basically, population of ducks of one strain and the other one of a different strain that come together and they live as a species. That they can interbreed with each other and are similar looking. That is what a species is. And then you have a community, which are populations of different species. So you have different populations, population of different species living and interacting together in one place. So that's a community. So in this case, here we have different types of birds and ducks. So these are different species living and interacting in one place. That's a community. An ecosystem is literally our populations of organisms interacting with each other and with their physical environment. So an ecosystem is literally means these communities which are living, so hence biotic, that are interacting with the environment. So this could be basically abiotic things that are not living, that are basically the rocks, the environment, things that are not living again. So that one is a whole ecosystem. The water, basically, the plants are still living, but all these the rocks, that's an ecosystem. Biosphere is Earth in an ecosystem that we call a biosphere. So it's basically the global sum of all ecosystems. It's multiple, it's literally all the ecosystems together. That's a biosphere. So it's super important for you guys to know what the difference is. And questions can arise. I'll give you an example of what a question can arise here in an exam. So let's imagine basically a community. In LAU, the community, does that include humans and cats, or does it only include only humans? So you start thinking about it. Okay, community are all populations of different species living and interacting together in one place. So yeah, you have the humans as a species and the cats are a species. So yes, it is actually. That's the community, then the community of LAU. And it does include the cats. So this is how you need to think in that kind of sense. So if I'm saying the population of LAU, no, then the population of LAU does not include cats. It's not, because cats are, they do not look like us, basically, and they're not of the same species. So one thing that you have to remember, that every time that we go from one hierarchy to the other, so if we go from an atom to the molecule to the cell to the tissue to the organ to the body system to the organism to the population community, every time we go from one layer to the other, new properties emerge. I'll give you an example of this, okay? So let's imagine here we have atoms together. These atoms come together and they create a amino acid. This amino acid is extremely different to the atoms. Despite that they're made basically from them, they have new properties. These new properties are basically now, we call them emergent properties, properties that they emerged because of the interaction of these atoms together to create this molecule. So that's what we call emergent properties. So then these, let's say, amino acids come in and they create a protein, a macromolecule. Well, this macromolecule has new emergent properties that it didn't have together as one molecule. So if we take let's say one amino acid like alanine, and then we basically take, let's say now we get different amino acids to create insulin. Well, now insulin has a function which is basically to help us with our blood sugar. So now it has a new emergent property because of the interaction of all of these amino acids coming together to create insulin. Then you have all these proteins coming together to create a cell. Now this cell can do many different types of properties. It can actually do cellular respiration. It can actually do some enzyme catalysis. Now suddenly there's new emergent properties coming out because of the interactions. And life per se is an emergent property, because life per se, so to get here to this organism, to this life, yeah, we've had to basically combine multiple things together, and basically have emerged to what we are now, to a person, to someone that it's complex, that we can think with our heads. We can actually catabolize a lot of different types of foods. We're able to basically do many different functions because we managed to get all these different types of cells and whatnot, and all the different types of structures, and basically organize them, and they gave us a property, which is life. So this is where I'm going to stop today.